agenda with the changes. Sorry.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, the motion is carried. It's my understanding there are no commendations. So let's go on to number, we need to go to number 2A, the election of officers. Dr. Johnson, how does that work?
Well, it's a board. The board is elected, so you guys have to, somebody makes a motion, and if there's more than one motion or a second on that, we have to have a motion and a second.
You do not need a second on the.
Not on the nominations, but just make the nominations.
Okay.
And then,
Okay, so do you want to start with the vice chair or vice chair? Does it matter?
Usually it's the chair.
Start with the
Is there a
chair.
nomination for chair?
I'd like to nominate Susan Ramos to continue as chair. I would like to nominate Jeremy Pearson.
Okay, any other nominations?
I move that nomination cease then.
Dr. Johnson, just take a vote or wait for Megan or? Okay. All in favor of Jeremy, raise your right hand, please. All in favor of Susan Ramos, raise your right hand, please. Motion there. Okay.
You can.
Okay.
yeah, you do it.
Oh.
In this, you do.
Oh, okay. All right. So let's, I guess I will continue as chairman. So let's open it for vice chair. Nominations are open for vice chair. I'll nominate Alicia Monk.
I would like to nominate Marlon.
Okay. Any other nominations?
I got news. So I don't know if it's appropriate or now, but I'll probably be resigning, and only because I've taken on a new job, and most probably no one in here, very many people know that. I still work for the Postal Service, but for the next at least year and a half, I have a commitment that I'm working for headquarters, and so I'm working with 3 different states, and I'm doing most of that via telework and other things. And so I didn't want to do it this way. I was telling Luke on the way in, but that I wanted to write something nice up, but I was trying it over the next little bit, and my old job I've done for like 20 years, and so it requires a ton of time, and it doesn't require a ton of extra brain power. But the job I'm doing now requires a ton of time and a ton of extra brain power, and a ton of like extra like names and things like that. You know what I mean? Like, so it's been pretty.
They've been trying to get you into headquarters for a long time.
It's been a lot.
So you have to move somewhere?
No, I'm not moving. No, I'm domiciled out of I moved to my basement right now, so not in my house, but it's in my own office. But anyway, it's.
Well, you've been a great asset to the board, and we will miss you.
Yeah, so
So we'll wait for the official minute.
Okay. Yeah, I'll get the official right. But I was just saying, I appreciate the nomination, but I don't do it be good. So thank you.
You have been a great asset to us.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's been a good 7 years. I wanted to make it to my end of my term, but I don't think that's going to be fair to the overall district itself. So probably expect that. Sorry. Yeah.
So is there any other nominations? And then I guess we'll vote for Alicia. All those in favor? Any opposed? And I guess Alicia has another nomination. Again, with number 3, there are no commendations. Is that correct, Mr. Johnson? Correct. So we have some visiting patrons. Is Mr. Hawkins here?
So Mr. reached out to someone about, it was concerned about being able to use the soccer fields. And we spoke with him about, I'll have an updated my superintendent's report out of the soccer fields, the grass, baseball, softball, soccer green.
Just keep going. And I don't see Mr. Escobedo here either. So I guess we'll skip that one also. Yeah, he comes in late. Okay, Mr. Johnson, would you like to do your superintendent's report?
Sure, just a couple of things I have. It looks like a long one, and I'm hopefully going to try to get through it quick, but I think it's important to keep everyone updated. And I was telling Mrs. Morinaki that I have a lot of people ask me how my summer vacation is going, and I said, what summer vacation? So we're working, right? This is the time Mr. Hawkins and I, our district office personnel, are working really hard. I look at Crystal and Christine from the payroll department. I look at Jacoby, who's getting a new setup for the synergy for the students. July 1 is the new school year. We have gotten ready for principals when they come in August or late July. So it's a busy time for us. And so this is the kickoff week calendar. I wanted all the board members to be aware of it, particularly the very last row there, August 19th. Well, let's first put 15. So August 15th is new employee orientation. August 16th is the teachers' first work day. That's for everybody. The teachers, certified teachers. August 18th is when the IAs come for all teachers. And then the 19th is the district kickoff in the auditorium. That's at 7:45. Typically we gather for food and snacks in the foyer, and then we go into the auditorium. That's where all employees for our kickoff for the school year. Just want to go.
Is that something that you want us to
We certainly want to invite all school board members there to welcome. So typically we have a board chair and or vice chair give a welcome, and so I want all of you to be aware of that.
And that is AM, right?
Yes, 7:45 a.m.
Okay,
Yep.
just checking.
Thank you for asking. Second on my list, superintendent's report, I wanted to introduce Gina White. She's sitting out here. Gina is our new special ed director for the district. She comes to us from several different places, but with a lot of experience. She was very impressive in the interviews, and we've done a few switcheroos, as you can tell in the hallway. We have a lot of things in the hallway. We had to kind of move people and things around to accommodate the needs of the workers here. We really welcome her here. And look forward to her sharing her wisdom. So I wanted to just go over number 3. As you can see, it's our summer school and migrant program. In our summer school, we had approximately 400 students attend pre-K through 8th grade, and we had 15 high school students recovering credit during that time. We were really happy this year. Not that we have been every year with our administrators, but this was the first year that Talon Vickers and Andrea Aaron were both 2 certified administrators. They are current middle school teachers, but Talon did the middle school and Andrea did the pre-K through 5 programs. It was really a great experience for both of them, and very impressed with both of them. We also, in 3E, we had a binational teacher exchange program. We had 2 teachers come from Mexico. Very impressive in the costumes and the dances. So many people were able to attend that. It was awesome. It was part B, but I talked about the parent advisory committee was very much involved in helping the binational teachers prepare for that. We had 800 open house attendees. There was dinner, a light dinner served, as well as dancing and singing that night. Today is where they started part F, Oregon Migrant Leadership Institute over at TPCC. There's your middle school students this week. For the following 2 weeks, it will be high school students. So we are really involved with the orientation students along with this as well. And we are in Region 21. Part B. We have 800 migrant students. And of the 800, we have over 500 participating in our supplements of summer services so far. That's summer school or preschool or any of the other things that we can offer. Martha Lasso is continuing to offer credit recovery through August. And Lucia Trompero is our school readiness specialist. We call her our preschool specialist. She's doing home visits with those families getting ready. And our summer programs, we're very appreciative of our lunch or food service, breakfast and lunch being served not only here at the cafeteria but around locations in the town. And just appreciate is helping there. And then on the back side of that page, item number 4, our Title 1C update. As you know, we're going through a re-interview audit process. Continuing work with ODE. They told us, when was it, in May, that it was going to take up to 3 months. So we're hoping, I spoke with them. They're not too much. They're kind of finished their process, and they were hoping that before August, before school started, early August, they would come back to have community meetings and speak to us about that. Hopefully we will know in time to plan for that. I have worked with the superintendents of both Vale and Adrian through the process that ODE has asked us in the budget areas. Most of those have been approved. They are still summer school, Crystal. We're a little frustrated about that, but it is what it is. I don't know what to do to speed that up. So, and then I wanted to give some facilities updates. 5A, our tennis courts. As you see, they've been out there working very hard. It really looks nice. Most of us, well, we haven't been able to get on the court to see the cracks fixed, but they will finish tomorrow, and we'll be able to put the nets up for those in our community who would like to access that. Our gym floors, the high school refinish began today. Hopefully they'll be finished by Thursday, and then begin at the middle school on Friday. And then our track, 95% will be completed by tomorrow. We're needing to pour some concrete around the long jump pits and the runway to frame that. I don't know if Jesse said it was cracked or we just don't have it. We don't have it, so there needs to be a frame there. So track doctor will come back and finish up what they need to do on the competition surface once those concrete frames are put in. And then our baseball, soccer complex. Baseball season ends tomorrow. That's the summer baseball, so we can then gain access. Trenching a new line in the outfield baseball, redoing water lines on the soccer fields. We've had some community members frustrated that they can't get access out there. We have just said it is under construction. We are trying to get the grass ready for competition this fall. Obviously, one year we had competition on the football field, and it's not a terrible place, but it does put a lot of use on that field as well. And so we appreciate everybody's patience as we are making those improvements to our competition fields for soccer, baseball, and track, and of course volleyball, basketball courts.
Out in the complex areas, there's somewhere for spectators to sit, because that's nice when it was in the football area, because then we could sit and watch.
All for soccer.
For soccer.
We do typically little bleachers out there.
Oh, is that okay?
They're not there now because we're working on
Sure.
everything. Yes, we will.
Okay.
But you're right. They're not like the football
Right.
bleachers.
Yeah.
So,
As long as there's something.
yes, that's it.
So Crystal, would you like to do your financial report, please? Sure.
So tonight I present to you the final financial numbers with a little asterisk because nothing's really final until our audit is finished. But this is for fiscal year ending June 30th of this year. So the first page is just our summary of our general fund. Don't quote me on these numbers, they could change a little depending on the audit. But if you see our total revenue for the year, was a little over $19 million. Total expenses for the year was almost $14 million. So that leaves an ending fund balance of over $5 million. And then as of July 1, that becomes our beginning fund balance. So your ending fund balance becomes your beginning fund balance. The next page actually breaks down the month of, well, the actuals of June. What you will notice is there are zeros for current year and prior year tax, and that's because I just didn't key them in this report. So we did receive some taxes in that, so that number will go up. But overall, for the month of June, our expenditures for the general fund were over $2.4 million. Our revenue, you'll notice we didn't have a state school fund, like I've been saying all year. But this month, the month of July, we get 2 payments. So, are there any questions on anything for the year? After that is our district LGIP account. And it shows a summary of what went in that account this month, the month of June, and what went out. You'll notice we did transfer a large $2.5 million, and that was just to cover all of our payrolls and expenditures at year end. And then the county sends their monthly breakdown of the taxes we received. And they also included this year a lovely year-end report summarizing the entire year. And then after that is our operating statement for our middle school bond. After taxes for the month of June, we are ending with a bond balance of a little over $60,000. So that will just continue to grow as we receive taxes until we pay our next debt service payment in the end of November, beginning of December. And then followed by that report is our LGIP for our middle school bond. That money is kept separate from our other money, and a breakdown of the taxes from the county on that fund. And another lovely year-end report. Is there any questions on that? Okay. After that is our early head start operating statement. So this year we ended our total revenue a little over $384,000. Our total expenditures for the year were $348,000. So we are ending this year with an ending fund balance of $36,000. So that rolls over July 1 to their beginning fund balance. And after that is our food service operating statement. I believe what I included in your packets, I didn't have all the meal counts from June yet, so I made a note that the revenue I put down didn't include the early Head Start counts. We just hadn't gotten them counted. It was kind of crazy, and everyone's been moving lately. But I did finally get those counts, and it did increase our revenue for the year to $1,023,000. So it went up about $6,000. Our total expenditures for the year, $967,000. So we have an ending fund balance in our food service at $56,000.
I have to say, just a comment about that, how remarkable this is in a moment, or I say a moment, but in a time of drastically increasing food prices that we're still paying about. So that's.
Well, so I probably will be reporting kind of yucky numbers for the month of July, and that's because we don't have summer school, which was 400 students. We are serving in the park. They have redone their rules this year that a student has to come get their lunch. They can't just come up and ask for 10 lunches.
Actually, they said they can't now.
Oh, they can't?
Gone back and forth.
So now we're switching. So, but I'm still, it's not like us serving every student on campus. So our revenue will be decreased for this month, and we'll still have our payroll costs. So we probably won't have great numbers, but once we get back in school, better. And after that is our payroll report for the month of June. I'm counting 6 payrolls Christy ran in the month of June. Good job.
Is that all? Really.
And then after that is our approval of the bills. Everything for June 7th, which was the last report that I presented last month, I ended it at fiscal year end, so 6/30. So that was everything else paid out for the year. That is all I have for you until we get the consent agenda. Or if you have questions about the budget calendar I threw in your packet, it is my proposal, but you don't have to, you can look at it and get back to me.
Thank you, Kristen. Okay, you want to take a look at the consent agenda? Look it over before we approve it. There are some changes. Yes. And if there are no comments or questions, we can make a motion to accept it.
So were there any actual changes, or are we just recertifying what was already there?
Should just be certified.
Yeah.
It's all status quo.
Okay. Yeah, looks good to me. I move that we accept the consent agenda as written.
All in favor? Okay, motion is carried. We have some old business, we have some FFA vehicle offers, and I guess Mr. Cruikshank couldn't be here, but we're supposed to refer to Brother Blackman because he had talked to you.
Yeah.
So would you like to share?
So, and then we had a conversation today. So, this is where I believe we're at. And correct me.
Yeah, you're bringing this information that we can share, right?
So there is a need. You know, we've gone kind of back and forth in our conversation about this being a long-term need. And there's been a couple times at the beginning of the summer where we were reimbursing at the IRS rates for mileage while he was using his personal vehicle. He was using his personal vehicle because we were not able to get a vehicle for him, a bus or a van or anything else. And so there is a need. As we look at anticipated, this is Crystal, as we look at anticipated pathways funding, there may be additional money that can be used for a vehicle. And as I discussed with Dr. Johnson, it may be worthwhile to get a vehicle that's going to be around a while. You know, it's a good investment. It's going to be a long-term solution instead of something that we're going to have ongoing maintenance. So I think at this point in time, I hate to push it out further, but we want to clarify what funds are available, and so that we can make the best purchase possible. And that doesn't mean a thoughtful, wise purchase. When I talked to Chad, he was okay with it. He does believe that there's a need. He referred to Bell's vehicle and how that's been such a good resource for their program. Talking with Dr. Johnson, we also talked about having some checks and balances in place. For example, it may still be kept at the transportation with the transportation department and checked out for individual trips. It may also be available for other clubs and sports with FFA being given priority, but if they're not using it, it's available as a district's resource.
Even though it was paid for with FFA funds?
We have to be careful with grants,
We have to be careful.
with what money we're using and making sure that that's compatible. So yeah.
So what money is available? How much do we have right now, and how much could we maybe anticipate for next year?
So I believe his proposal was 21,000. And which would buy a vehicle. Some of the vehicles he was looking at have like 100,000 miles.
Can I interject for just a second? Interestingly enough, when he gave us this proposal, it was 2 months ago, it was 2 school board meetings ago, if you remember correctly. And in those 2 months, the vehicle market has changed drastically, hasn't it? It really has. So I'm not saying that everything's back to a regular normal deal, but as you're looking at some of those vehicles, they're well over 100,000 miles, most of them 200,000 miles.
Yeah,
Those are the
150 to 250,000. And I guess that's the biggest question is who pays for the repairs?
So, I think Mr. Cruikshank's thought was, well, it becomes a district vehicle, therefore the insurance maintenance comes through the district, not. So there was that concern, right? So I did check around with a few other districts. In particular, I know Anna Marie Chamberlain, who's the FFA teacher at Vail, and her husband is our girls basketball coach. So I saw her at a basketball thing and just said, "Hey, tell me about your vehicle. Do you have one?" She says, "Yes, we do." Vail has chosen to buy quite a lot more expensively, but they allocate it to all CTE programs. It's not just at So CTE, so it's not available for sports trips and stuff like that, but it is a CTE for whatever other needs. Now, I think of our FBLA, maybe I don't know what they're doing, but it typically is going to be for an FFA, mostly as he's traveling to the crops, to the animals, to the transport, helping with that. And I think Mr. Jack, I don't have the numbers, Crystal, I didn't ask you to give the numbers on the reimbursement to Mr. Cruikshank for his IRS mileage, but it does tend to be what the
2022 IRS mileage is 585 cents per mile. I have paid too many things for the month of June to remember how many miles he turned in, but it was quite a few, and he has a purchase order for this month as well, because he's still traveling to students' homes.
So there is a need for it. I do understand the concern about how do we regulate this? Like how do you know if it's being used for work or for hauling a personal boat up to the dam? Who knows what, right? How do you monitor that? So there's some things that I think we can iron out, work out. But I do think it's you said, is it a want or is it a need? I think we're paying for it somewhere or another, right? So if we do have grant money that's not taken from our general, then certainly it's what can we purchase instead of that, or is that the need that we have? I think it's a legitimate need. So
is that what the payment was in the bills that we approved?
Oh, yes, it would be in there.
So it's $1,000.
But you said something when I visited with you about him, the possibility of him getting more grant money this year, maybe he can combine the 20,000 with that. So how much do you think that'll get?
hopefully it will be the same amount.
So
40,000.
40,000, he can buy something with less mileage, I would assume. When would he get that money?
I don't know.
I mean,
We typically don't know what the grant money is till December. I think this year it might have been January.
I think referring to pathways, I think it is December, and just how they do that. The programs, when students stay in the program for the pathway, they take at least 3 classes, or when they get a certificate, then it generates revenue for that specific to that program for pathways funding. And part of this is because our relevant students have done so extremely well with being certified. And so, and then of course our ag students, they're going through the whole sequence of classes, they're the pathways, and so it does generate some revenue. So anyway, but that was in my conversation with both Mr. Cruikshank and Dr. Conklin. We need to know which numbers, and then just as wide stewards, we don't want to spend $20,000 for a 200,000-mile vehicle. We want something that's going to work, and then the checks and balances. Is it was going to be maintained by the transportation department? Is it really a district vehicle, or is it paid for by FFA money? Is it really an FFA vehicle, and they pay the maintenance? We need to work this out. And so we are proposing that we do delay it a little bit more.
I think that's wise. Yeah, maybe wait until they get some more money, camera or something that's got less mileage.
And have everything ironed out as far as who's responsible for what, so we shouldn't do anything rash.
Okay, we had a couple of board members get to go to the annual conference, and Pat and Megan were going to share some things.
Before we do that, I'd like to ask Dr. Johnson, at our last meeting, we had 4 individuals who were hired but had no pending licensure and that sort of thing. If you could just give us an update on that.
I'm trying to remember who all 4, but I will say this. I have been in contact with TSBC multiple times every week to get people's licensures. So our elementary vice principal, she's originally from Oregon, lived in Nevada, so she is, I believe her license is current. Is that right? Yeah, I didn't remember seeing that one. Our high school choir teacher, hers is pending. So TSBC is backed up. I think they're telling me it's a 70-day backup. So we've got the letters written, we've got the paperwork all submitted, and we're just waiting. So, Oregon recognizes at this point, TSPC recognizes that we are dealing with some unusual circumstances, having a difficult time getting people to apply for certain positions. And so, people who maybe have bachelor's without certifications in teacher aren't being approved and restricted licenses as they begin a process to become certified. So, we have a few of those.
Have we had any applicants for our band position?
We have not yet.
So we still don't have that.
No, ma'am. We are working on that. We've been reaching out extensively. Megan, I've asked her to advertise in other places. Mr. Jackman has been calling universities that we typically don't call. I've reached out to some band teacher friends of mine. Yes.
There's one applicant.
One applicant?
There's one applicant.
Where?
We have not, she applied for both band and choir.
Oh.
She's still eligible for band.
Great.
And so we have not moved forward because of the licensure. And I've actually reached out and the process of scheduling it.
Is she
That developed right in the talks earlier today. That developed today.
Is she local or from far away?
Ontario.
Good question. Any other? Okay. Love to hear about your company.
Okay, Megan Glenn, Megan Robbins, and I went to the OSBA summer conference. Megan had a special session for administrative assistants. Megan and I went to the board session. The primary, and I like to keep things short, but I like to give a report because you all have paid for it. And this comes back as being valued to all of us. So I'm trying to just hit bullet points. The keynote speaker for this engagement was Steve Constantino. He is pretty well known. He started out as a band teacher. And during the break, I did ask him if he would like to apply for a band in Nyssa. However,
Recruiting everywhere. Good job.
he is a little beyond that. Steve Constantino went from being a band director to being a vice principal, being a principal of a high school, the lowest performing high school in Virginia, and within a year brought that up to being the second highest performing high school in the nation. So what he had to say was impressive and important. The keynote address was on family engagement and quiet matters, and he used or spoke about 5 simple principles that he developed under his logic method. I could go into those, but I'll basically just tell you that what it comes down to is he stated to us that this is a different world, that most families today are not the families that all of us grew up with 2 parents. Some have multiple parents, multiple generations. So it's a different world, and we need to have a different vision as we lead our education forward. Basically, he came out with 2 statements that I thought were key points. The first was the board is the catalyst to promote family engagement. Family engagement is the one piece that helps elevate our student performance. He illustrated by saying you can buy, you can have the most wonderful cake recipe in the whole world. You can buy the best flour, the best sugar, the best butter. That's your student, and you can give it to that student. But if you don't have baking powder, that cake's going to be flat. The baking powder in this whole recipe is the family. And we need to do a better job of engaging our families. The second point is Title I schools must have a family engagement policy. We are a Title I school. We do have a family engagement policy. I'm going to impose on Megan and myself to take a look at that policy and work with OSBA and make sure that it does hit all the things that we need to have it hit for our success here. After the keynote speech, we broke into learning groups. Megan and I took different groups. The group that I took, the first one was Aligning for Student Success, ODE's integrated methodology. That is basically this little form that we got last month. All I wanted to say is, this sounds great. It's wonderful. But ODE has another 100 initiatives that you have to apply for to show our way. The other thing is that in the group that I was in, there was a lot of concern about career and technical education. So much so that it was, I thought that it was a concern here in our area, but it is everywhere. In this hour and 15-minute session, from this, we went on to talk about the budget and how the budget, our budget, needs to be looking at these and needs to be having these in mind as our budget is prepared. Then I went to another session and it was about school finance. Thank you, Crystal. So basically, it was very general. We should be fully aware that the revenue that comes into us is approximately 30% local, 60% state, and 10% federal. Our expenditures are about 80% for salaries and benefits. The next thing we discussed in this school finance was the budget board. And the statement was, and I think it's a very good one, is that we should look at our budget board and decide now, or at least by September, which seats are going to need to be filled so we can start looking for someone. Our budget process, as Crystal knows, starts this fall or earlier. And we need to have a longer time to be able to review that. In other words, Crystal, if you can get it to us earlier, you know, give us a week or 2 weeks so we can look at it, get to you with questions before we have our budget meeting. And I recognize that a lot of the problem is you just get those numbers at the very end and have to plug them in.
I might have to redo my budget calendar because I just put your packet.
Well, we
Sorry.
So Crystal, in November, we've been asking the auditor to finish the prior year by November. It's always just before Christmas, December. Actually, sometimes after Christmas.
And that makes it really.
It's hard for her to know what we need to do. So anyway, yes, you're.
Yeah. So, I mean, these are just things that they were saying. Then I have one other thing that came as a surprise to me. Our budget board are 7 of us and 7 members from the community. A quorum of those 14 would be 8. If we only have a quorum, 8 people, and 6 agree with the budget and 2 do not, the budget fails because that is a majority of the quorum, but it's not a majority of the budget board. So that is something we need to keep in mind, that when we take a vote, if there are 4 of us and it's a quorum, and 3 of us vote for a motion and 1 is against, the motion fails because it is not a majority of the board. As I said, I'm trying to hit high points. We then broke into hot topic sessions, and there were sessions, there were 25 sessions, and we were able to pick 3 sessions for 17-minute discussion with an expert. I picked recent policy updates, and Megan's going to tell you all what she did. I picked recent policy updates, and the changes that we've been getting have been mainly due to legislative changes, legal changes, but we need to be aware that family engagement and equity are important policies, and they are going to be required. So the next one I picked was what's new for the Legislative Policy Committee. The Legislative Policy Committee is going to become more involved in actually generating certain legislation and things like that. And we'll spend actually sort of direct our lobbyists, OSB lobbyists, and what to do. And they do want more input from local boards. And guess what? I will be hitting you, asking you some questions. Not today, but later. The other thing I did was board self-evaluation, and Vince Adams, who conducted that, said it was really board self-reflection. OSBA does have a tool that we can use, and I'm sure it costs money. But it is probably a good idea if we, our board, evaluates ourselves, because we've been together now for a year. We've gotten our feet on the ground. We need to know what we're doing. And he actually went on to say it's probably a good thing to do this every 1 or every 1 to 2 years. After that, there were regional roundtables where we could get to know other people from our regions. Just sort of meet and greet type thing. On Sunday, we had 2 more class sessions. The one I wanted to take was on how the board can strategize to develop a vision of what we want done. However, that one was canceled, and I wasn't able to do that. But I did do public comment and best practices, which was very interesting. One thing we need to realize is we do not have to have a public comment item on our agenda. And I learned several different strategies to control, or not control, but to make that portion flow smoothly. And those, if we need to have, I can share. The other thing I did was basic board superintendent roles and responsibilities. And the board needs to remember there's 7 of us. We have 1 employee, and he's sitting right here. So, but the big thing is that board members do not speak for the whole board. They only speak for themselves. And that the board itself sets the course, or sets what the district wants to do or go. The superintendent steers. He does the how. The board needs to check to make sure what we're doing. In other words, if the board decides we are leaving from New York and going to London, England, we give Dr. Johnson the directions. That's where we want to go. Well, he's steering. If all of a sudden we look out and we find we're headed to Cuba, we need to make a course correction. And so this is a very simple way of saying what our position is related to him and what we should do. We need to get together sometime soon, possibly in a board retreat, to establish a strategic plan, which we have done before. Our strategic plan is different than our board goals. So the plan is, not our vision. The plan is where we want to be, say, in 5 years. Our goals are where we want to be in a year, on the way to that strategic plan. And the board needs to get together and do this annually. And after we get our board goals together, then that will give Dr. Johnson some guidance as to what and where his goals perhaps should be. Other than that, I had a great time networking. I talked to a lot of individuals from small boards, from large boards, there was no one else from this side of the state there, at least from Nader County. There were from John Day and such. Was able to connect with the Color Caucus. I had lunch with Jim Green, which was very nice. I learned a lot of things. I was not able to speak to Cole Gill. He was there. His little round table was very busy for some reason. So anyway, Megan?
So going back to the keynote, there was a question that he posed, and I have thought about it, and it says, if given a choice, would our families choose us? Like right now, geographically, our families have to choose us, but if they had the choice to be anywhere, would they choose us? That was one of the things that I thought was interesting. And then talking about ways that we can engage differently versus, instead of putting more work on our teachers and our staff, finding different ways that we can engage. Sometimes even just how we phrase things. That was something that we as a district can talk about. I went to what was it called? It was the Rural Equity and Student Achievement session, and we talked about the Eastern Oregon Promise, getting our students ready for after high school. And one of the things that was interesting is the lady that was there was from Boardman, and she says they start talking about it in 7th grade. They give them that whole career path in 7th grade, and they start talking about it, which I thought was kind of interesting. And then there was talk about how students don't want to take classes in college that they can take in high school. So how are we pushing that? As well as not every kid wants to go to college, but we also need to normalize it. But if college is not where a majority of our students are going, then we need to make sure that we put them on the pathway to get out of high school with a place where they can be. And then I went to the Superintendent Evaluation. That was interesting. But they just talk about how the evaluation is not a certain time. It's a process. Like from the moment your evaluation is done, we need to be starting to think about your next evaluation. And then they also talked about doing quarterly check-ins. How are you doing? What can we do? What more do you need to be successful in your goals? And then I went to one about diploma options, and I guess there's a educational committee that's supposed to release new guidelines in September, so that should be coming out. They're just trying to decide if the 24 credits that we are pushing is what students really need. And then also by September 15th of 2025, we are required to have an Educational Equity Advisory Committee. Fortunately, we don't have 10,000 students, or we'd have to have it by this September. But they said just because we aren't required to have it until 2025 doesn't mean we can't start it then. So that is something that we can dig into.
What was the name of that committee?
It is the Educational Equity Advisory Committee. And then there's a statute that I'm going to look up. Then I also went to a session on executive session, and it was just reiteration of what can be executive session and what can't. I have that list. And then I went to one on policy 101. We talked about Oregon administrative rules, what's required to be in policy, what's procedure, what's, public repeal, resolutions, that sort of thing. It was very interesting. I feel like I have a lot of reading to do, but I feel like we, as a group, work well together, and just finding that vision so we can make sure that our consumer, our students, are getting what we envision as a community. And then student voice. Give students a voice. Listen to students. That was it.
Megan, did you have anything else to say? Not good.
It's a long drive.
Okay, I guess that concludes our meeting. If there's no other input, the meeting is adjourned.